just across the street from City Hall on Spring Street and Temple for the weekly Wednesday Black Lives Matter protest against District Attorney Jacky Lacey, almost 3 years running now. And so they're just about to get started. There's usually a lot of people here, just a little bit of background. There's another protest going on, Imperial Highway, and it's at the Sheriff's Department, and that's where the guy got killed last week, whose name I can't remember at the moment, which is pretty bleak when you can't remember the names of people that are killed by the cops in LA because there's too many. So this is usually a big group. It's a smaller group today. And there's also a new class action lawsuit against the Sheriff's Department for excessive force and arresting a bunch of protesters and arresting them, putting them, shooting rubber bullets at them and stuff. DA Jacky Lacey. Protesters because Jacky Lacey historically will not prosecute law enforcement, and she's in the pocket of the police unions. Here we go.
I was reflecting and thinking with some of you that have been here for many of those Wednesdays. We were just right there. And then the police tried to run us off. And we moved there. And now we take over the whole street. Change is not always made just because we want it. It's made because we demand it and fight for it every day. And that's what we do here every Wednesday. We have come here now these many months and now years. But as always, as we have started, we always ground ourselves. We always connect ourselves. We always remember. Because by doing that, it says, this is why we are here. We are not here for just being here. We are here to do something, to demand something. And what we are demanding is change, fundamental change, transformative change, not just a few good things around the edges. And the person who leads us, who has been leading us up late in that, and without Mama Paula, has been Dr. Melina Abdullah. Y'all know her, don't you? Yeah. Well, she's not here today, so no. She's here. And of course, she is going to lead us in libation. And if you've ever been here before, you know that this becomes sacred ground for us. This is the space, room, and comfort we make for our families and those who have been impacted by police violence. So would you all welcome? Would you all demonstrate? Would you all remind yourself of how valuable this person is and welcome Dr. Melina Abdullah. Yeah.
Thank you, Baba Keely. Thank you, everybody, for gathering. Thank you to the ancestors for bringing us all together. We're reminded that the reason that we start with the pouring of libation is because sometimes the struggle for Black freedom can feel insurmountable. It can feel like an insurmountable struggle. It can feel like, when we look at these edifices and these buildings and think about the power of these people, when we think about $10 million being poured into Jacky Lacey's campaign by police associations who disguise themselves as so-called unions, it feels like too much to overcome. But when we recognize that it's about more than just those of us who are gathered here, that it's about all of the spirits that surround and guide us and move us forward, And when we recognize that every struggle that we've engaged in with our whole and complete selves, that we've engaged in righteously, we've won. It hasn't always been an easy victory. In fact, there are no easy victories. But we've always won. And we've always won because Spirit guides us forward. And so what the pouring of libation is, as we all know, is about recognizing the spiritual energy that's here. It's about recognizing that we have to acknowledge Spirit in the struggle. It's our most powerful tool. And when we call on the names, when we say their names, we're actually summoning those folks on whose behalf we struggle into space. So the tradition that we've begun to engage in here is first calling the names of those on whose behalf we struggle. I'll say a name, we repeat the name in unison, and then we all say Ashe. Ashe is a word of power. It's like saying Amen, Amen, so be it. Then we will call the names of African warrior ancestors to help us be courageous and visionary in our struggle. And then we'll close by calling the name of one spirit line or bloodline ancestor who specially kind of empowers us, puts their arms around us, moves us forward. Does that work for everybody? Yeah. Ashe? Ashe. And so we'll start by calling the name Dejan Kizi. Dejan Kizi. Ashe. Thank you for the beautiful flowers. Let's call the name A.J. Weber. A.J. Weber. Ashe. Ryan Twyman. Ryan Twyman. Ashe. Andres Guardado. Andres Guardado. Ashe. Waukesha Wilson. Waukesha Wilson. Ashe. Riddell Jones. Riddell Jones. Ashe. Mytrice Richardson. Mytrice Richardson. Ashe. Quentin Thomas. Quentin Thomas. Ashe. Rashario Mack. Rashario Mack. Ashe. Albert Ramon Dorsey. Albert Ramon Dorsey. Ashe. John Horton. John Horton. Ashe. Kenneth Ross Jr. Kenneth Ross Jr. Ashe. Johnny Anderson. Johnny Anderson. Ashe. Antoine Rose. Antoine Rose. Ashe. Anthony Vargas. Anthony Vargas. Anthony Vargas. Ashe. Jesse Romero. Jesse Romero. Ashe. Anthony McLean. Anthony McLean. Anthony McLean. Ashe. Darius Smith. Darius Smith. Ashe. Kenny Watkins. Kenny Watkins. Ashe. Carnell Snell. Carnell Snell. Ashe. Richard Risher. Richard Risher. Ashe. Keisha Michael. Keisha Michael. Keisha Michael. Ashe. Marquittin Sandlin. Marquittin Sandlin. Ashe. Caesar Rodriguez. Caesar Rodriguez. Ashe. Brendan Glenn. Brendan Glenn. Brendan Glenn. Ashe. Zelalem Ewenetu. Zelalem Ewenetu. Ashe. Brother Africa. Brother Africa. Ashe. Megan Hockaday. Megan Hockaday. Ashe. There's many others that we can call. The name that is filling your spirit, let it sink into your heart. Let it travel up your vocal cords and sit on the tip of your tongue. And on the count of 3, we're going to call that name. 1, 2, 3. Devin Brown. Ashe. The next set of names that we're going to call is our African warrior ancestors that we're asking to work through us. If you are filming, I'm going to ask you to just put your phone down for a minute and be fully present with us. Sometimes when we mediate through phones and technology, it limits the degree to which our spirit can engage. And this is about spiritual engagement right now. Okay? Let's start by calling the name Ya Asantewa. Ashe. Shaka Zulu. Ashe. Queen Nzinga. Ashe. Mama Harriet Tubman. Ashe. Sojourner Truth. Ashe. David Walker. Ashe. Gabriel Prosser. Ashe. Ida B. Wells. Ashe. Mary Church Terrell. Ashe. Ethel Hedgeman Lyle. Ashe. Eugenia Burns Hope. Ashe. Nellie Quander. Ashe. George Lyle. Ashe. Nat Turner. Ashe. Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. Ashe. Mama Ella Baker. Ashe. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Ashe. Coretta Scott King. Ashe. Malcolm X. Ashe. Betty Shabazz. Ashe. Marsha P. Johnson. Ashe. Marcus Garvey. Ashe. Charlotta Bass. Ashe. Brother Macapone. Ashe. Didon Kamathi. Ashe. Eddie H. Ashe. Sister Janisha, who we just lost today. Ashe. Biddy Mason. Ashe. Let's summon another name. Hold them in your spirit. Let them rest in your heart. Let the name travel up your vocal cords and rest on the tip of your tongue. And on the count of 3, we're going to call that name. 1, 2, 3. Ruby Ashe. The last name that we're going to call is in our own bloodline, our own spirit line. It's that ancestor who reminds us of our own power, of our own calling, who whispers in our ear, who moves us forward. We're going to call that name. We're going to call them by the name that they know us as calling them by. You have the ancestor. You have your ancestor. Summon them into your spirit. Hold them in your heart. Let their name travel up your vocal cords and rest on the tip of your tongue. And on the count of 3, we're going to call that name. 1, 2, 3. Grandma Rebecca. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. So before I pass on the mic and call up Ogie to be with us as we continue with a little bit of our spiritual work, one of the things I want to lift up is you all know that as we do this work and become closer to the victory, the backlash becomes stronger. And so it's really important to remember that there are counter forces coming from all angles. And we must not submit to those counter forces. We need to remember that those counter forces are natural, that they begin to clamp down harder as we get closer to our goal, as we get closer to our vision. So you will hear people saying, for instance, Black Lives Matter. The latest thing is we practice witchcraft. That the pouring of libation is witchcraft. It sounds like Salem or some shit, right? It's because our spiritual power is indeed power, right? And so they're trying to scare us away from the tools that have always brought us to victory. Does that make sense to y'all? Let's be real clear. They're not afraid of calling on their God or whatever spiritual energy they calling on, right? They're not afraid of calling on spirit themselves. So we must be unafraid. We must be courageous. We must be steadfast. We must be unapologetic in saying, yes, it's spirit that powers us forward and ensures our victory. And so I'm not here to preach to y'all. Some of y'all don't have the same spiritual practices that I do, right? Or that we do. That's okay. Whatever your spiritual practice is, use it because it is how we will win. Ashe? And so we cannot call the name Dijon Kazee and think that we're not somehow summoning spiritual energy. You cannot put up hashtags and pretend like there's no spirit attached to that. Does that make sense to y'all? So it's really important. See how spiritual energy it's really important that we call on the spiritual energy that powers us forward, that's always powered us forward, and that's always ensured our victory, and not be distracted, not be pushed into submission by someone else who knows the power of our spiritual work. Does that make sense to y'all? I'm going to also lift up, that's not the only way that they're coming at us. And later on, we'll be hearing about how the state is descending upon us, trying to cast us as the violent ones when we are here to counter their violence. So as they beat us, as they kill us, as they steal black life, they are sitting here acting as if when we say Dijon Kazee, we're somehow the violent ones. As when we write all cops are bad or bastards or whatever the B stands for, that we are somehow violent. That's a fucking statement. That's a fucking statement about the righteousness of our cause. We are compelled to do this work. We want to be very clear. What they're trying to do is to shift the narrative away from the fact that these are the ones armed with guns who shot David on Saturday night with rubber bullets that tear gas 7-year-old babies. They are the violent ones. We are the freedom fighters. We are the freedom fighters. Don't ever let them dissuade you from this work. And if you somehow kind of get lost, if that message, that counter message, that counter narrative that they're saying starts to seep into your spirit, summon your spiritual energy, summon that name of that grandmother, that auntie, that grandfather, that parent, that neighbor, that loved one that holds you, so that they can remind you of the truth, that we are the freedom fighters. In the same vein that Shaka Zulu is a freedom fighter, in the same vein that Denmark Vesey is a freedom fighter, in the same vein that Malcolm X is a freedom fighter, that Afeni Shakur is a freedom fighter, right? We are freedom fighters. And don't let them tell you that we're anything other than that or anything less. I want to bring up our dear sister Ogie, who's going to help us just close out the spiritual piece of the program, who's been contributing to Black Lives Matter work for the last few years and has a really beautiful offering for us here today.
Hi guys, my name is Ogie, and a few weeks ago I saw a post where these people had written down all the names of people that had been killed in Minneapolis since 2011 by police. And so I reached out to Melina and was like, hey, I think we should create something like that for us. And with your blessings, I would love to do it. And Melina was like, oh, absolutely, go ahead and do it. And so she sent me the link to Prosecute Killer Cops, where it has all 619 names. Well, at the time, it had 618, adding Dejan Kizzy to the list. And so I created this scroll to literally represent all the lives that have been taken from us through police brutality. Because I think, you know, as we come out here on a weekly basis, like sometimes you can start to become numb to the stories that you're hearing on a weekly basis, and we forget these individuals' humanity. And I wanted to give life to that. And so I created this scroll that holds all 619 names. And my hope is that you guys will take a look at each and every one of these names, that you will sit with these names and meditate on these names and pray over these names each and every time that you come out here. Because I think visuals are very powerful. And seeing these names in this particular format, I think it serves to show you the magnitude of harm that these systems and policing and the poor leadership of Jacky Lacey continues to make. So once again, my hope is that these names aren't in vain, and that you can truly, even though these lives are no longer with us and their breath was stolen from us, I hope that as you read each of these names, that it breathes life into you and it continues to push you to want to fight for justice. It continues to push you to want to come out here and continue to be involved. And so I hope it serves that purpose. And this is my offering. So thank you. What I would like to do then is for us to do a few breaths together collectively, do some breath work. One of the things I had to do in like creating this and making this possible is a lot of deep breath work, because the magnitude, once again, in creating something like this is really hard because you're sitting with each and every one of these names. And so I'm hoping that right now we can all collectively do a few breath work. So I'll lead us in a few deep breaths, because I think breath work is very, very powerful. It's a way to connect us to spirit. It's also a way to get us grounded and get us in a collective space. So if you'll all close your eyes right now, I'll lead us in a few rounds of breath work. So just take a few moments to just collect your breath individually. And then what I'll do is I'll lead us into a 3-round count, right? I'll say we'll take 3 deep inhales, we'll hold for 3, and then we'll exhale for 3. But I'll let you know when we get into that. So I just want you to get grounded right now in your individual breath. So I'm going to lead us into a round of breath work. So on the count of 3, we're going to inhale to 3. We're going to hold for 3. And then we're going to exhale for 3. So inhale collectively, 1, 2, 3. Hold for 3. Exhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold. Exhale on 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold. Exhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Hold. Exhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. And this final round will be our final round of collective breath work. So we're going to all collectively inhale again at 1, 2, 3. Hold for 3. Exhale for 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
What's up, Bubbles? How you feel? Got a can, huh? How are you? Good? All right. I like that. I'll see you in a while. So that's what's going on at Black Lives Matter.
What's up, man?
Mr. Munchies, how do you feel?
Man, I feel horrible right now.
I'm
I
sorry.
asked a question. When you speak on two gods, don't worry about them. I ain't worried about them. When you speak on two gods and you don't specify which one it is,
Was
and I
that
ask
you?
you a question,
Was that
yeah,
you?
that was me. And you see this guy with the camo pants on, he keep walking around like he's threatening. I said, how you doing? He gives me the fist. I said, that don't tell me nothing. Communication. But on the flip side, I talked to the cops down here. Somebody said you should talk to them because they're feeling good. He said I wrote down 18 names of people, 18 people who didn't speak to us. You know, it's like a relationship. Who's gonna say I love you first? That's what it is when it comes to the cops, and love you too.
I'll see you in a while. See you when I come back.
Yeah, for real.
Mr. Munchies. So that's what's going on at Black Lives Matter in downtown Los Angeles by City Hall. Prayers, pranayama, and lots of clarity around Los Angeles and how Los Angeles, how the situation with the sheriffs and the police department came to the point where they're killing more people than anybody else, any other law enforcement agency in the country. But also with a DA that's so leveraged that she will not prosecute police who kill people with impunity. And so it's the same issue as nationally. The police unions are huge lobbies. They have something called the Policeman's Bill of Rights, which is actually a legal document, and that's how they killing don't get prosecuted. So this is what's been going on here. This is a 3-year-old protest, and it's against DA Jacky Lacey by Black Lives Matter LA, which is the first ever oh, sorry, I just got distracted by this guy's rig. Come on, man, are you kidding me? Let me just pause on my broadcast for a second. Check this rig out. That's LA right there. Come to the BLM protest. What is it, a red?
Yeah, red camera on the movie.
Damn, dude. What? Who are you shooting for?
Fox.
Fox? What the fuck are you doing shooting for Fox? You're brown, like, kidding me?
We're doing a piece.
I don't know what to say because I don't really know what you're doing. So, God, that kind of freaked me out. You're shooting for Fox. So, indigenous man with a big rig shooting for Fox. I don't know. Anyways, so that's the, and just very briefly, there's usually a lot more people here. Well, this is a little bit small, but there's always people here. There was another protest going on right now, I think, on Imperial Highway where a few days ago the sheriff's department shot and killed somebody. I think it was actually like last week. And so there's a protest there, and I saw some photographs and read some reports online from people that I think are credible that the sheriff's department was actually lined up on some vantage point from above with live rounds in automatic weapons pointed at the crowd, the protesters, with their fingers on the trigger. So I want to make one more point, and then I'm going to tap out, and I'll come back for the march. This action always has a march after. It's like a short march. But so the sheriff's department, who's I'm not going to get into this too much, but in Los Angeles, if you don't know, the last sheriff, Lee Baca, his under sheriff Tanaka, and 22 sheriff's deputies went to prison, and they're still there. Those are corruption, and they were got into something with the FBI. Anyways, so that's the sheriff's department, and the LAPD has got the same kind of history. The last police chief stepped down after somebody threw their dead niece's ashes in his face during a police commission meeting. So welcome to LA. I'll come back.